6 months earlier, everything was perfect. I woke up that Tuesday morning to the sound of Emma giggling in her bedroom. She was talking to her stuffed animals again, planning some elaborate tea party that would probably involve half the kitchen. I smiled as I pulled on my work clothes and headed downstairs to start breakfast. "Daddy," Emma bounded down the stairs in her pink pajamas, her hair a beautiful mess of curls. "Can we have pancakes, please?" "Of course, sweetheart." I lifted her onto the kitchen counter and let her help me measure the flour. Her tiny hands were so careful with the measuring cup, her tongue sticking out in concentration. These were the moments that made everything worth it. We had moved to Millbrook 2 years ago after my divorce. I wanted Emma to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere she could ride her bike without me worrying about traffic or crime. This little town seemed perfect. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a school where everyone knew everyone. It felt like stepping back in time to a simpler America. After breakfast, Emma ran outside to play in our backyard while I cleaned up. Through the kitchen window, I watched her kick her soccer ball around the grass. She was getting good at dribbling, her little legs pumping as she chased the ball from one end of the yard to the other. The morning sun filtered through the oak trees, casting dancing shadows across the lawn. Emma's laughter echoed off the neighbor's fence as she scored an imaginary goal against an invisible goalkeeper. She threw her arms up in victory, just like she had seen the professional players do on television. "Did you see that, Daddy?" she called out, pointing to where the ball had rolled near the garden. "Amazing goal," I called back, drying my hands on a dish towel. I knew Sheriff Karen by reputation only. She had been the law in Millbrook for 8 years, and people said she was tough but fair. I had seen her around town a few times, always in her perfectly pressed uniform, always with that serious expression that seemed to dare anyone to cause trouble in her jurisdiction. She had pulled me over once for a broken tail light, but she was professional about it. Just wrote the warning and sent me on my way. The neighbors spoke about her with a mixture of respect and caution. Mrs. Henderson next door said Karen kept the teenage troublemakers in line. Mr. Peterson from across the street mentioned that crime had dropped since she took over. Everyone seemed to agree that Millbrook was safer with Karen wearing the badge. I finished cleaning the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. Emma was still playing outside, her voice carrying through the morning air as she narrated her own soccer commentary. The peace of that moment feels impossible to recapture now. The simple joy of watching my daughter play in our own backyard, in our safe little town, with nothing more pressing to worry about than whether we needed groceries for dinner. If someone had told me that in 30 minutes our lives would be destroyed forever, I would have laughed. If they had said that the woman sworn to protect us would be the one to tear our world apart, I would have called them crazy. But that is exactly what happened. Emma had been playing for about 20 minutes when her ball rolled into the street. Not the busy main road, just our quiet residential street where cars barely went 15 miles per hour. But still, I had taught her never to chase a ball into any street without looking. "Emma, wait," I called out as I saw her little legs start moving toward the pavement. She was already running. 5-year-olds do not always remember rules when their favorite soccer ball is involved. I dropped my coffee mug and sprinted after her, my bare feet hitting the cool grass and then the rough asphalt. I caught up to her just as she reached the ball. She was laughing, completely unaware of any danger, bending down to pick up her toy. I scooped her up in my arms, ball and all, relief flooding through me. "Remember what Daddy always says about streets?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light even though my heart was pounding. "Look both ways," she recited, but she was more interested in the ball than the lesson. That was when I heard the car door slam. Sheriff Karen had pulled up in her patrol car while I was focused on Emma. I had not heard her arrive. She was walking toward us with long, aggressive strides, her hand already resting on her gun belt. Her face was hard, her eyes scanning the scene like she was approaching a dangerous criminal instead of a father and his daughter. "What is going on here?" Her voice was sharp, demanding. "Nothing, officer. Just my daughter chasing her ball." I set Emma down but kept my hand on her shoulder. Something about Karen's tone made me nervous. "I got a call about domestic disturbance. Shouting, possible child endangerment." Karen stopped about 10 feet away from us, her posture tense and ready. "There is no disturbance. We were just playing in the yard." I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable. Emma was looking back and forth between us, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "Step away from the child." Karen's hand moved closer to her weapon. "What? No, this is my daughter." The situation was spiraling out of control so fast I could barely process it. "Officer, I think there has been some mistake." I said step away from the child, now. Emma started to cry. She pressed closer to my leg, wrapping her little arms around my knee. The sight of a police officer treating her daddy like a criminal was terrifying for a 5-year-old who had been taught that police were the good guys. "Please, you are scaring her," I said, my voice getting desperate. "I can show you my identification. I live right here." I pointed to our house just 30 feet away. "Do not reach for anything." Karen drew her weapon. The world slowed down. I stared at the gun pointed at me and my daughter. This could not be happening. Not in our safe little town. Not over a soccer ball in the street. "Daddy," Emma's voice was small and confused. "It is okay, baby," I whispered, but I knew it was not okay. Nothing about this was okay. I raised my hand slowly, trying to show Karen I was not a threat. "Please, let me just show you my driver's license. My name is on the mailbox right there." "Get on the ground." "Officer, please." The gunshot was louder than anything I had ever heard. The sound seemed to echo forever, bouncing off the houses and trees and piercing straight through my soul. Emma screamed and fell to the pavement beside me. Time stopped. The world stopped. Everything that mattered in my life was suddenly bleeding on the asphalt, and I could not understand how we had gotten here. "Emma," I dropped to my knees beside her, pressing my hands against the wound in her leg. Blood seeped through my fingers, warm and terrifying. "Baby, stay with me." Karen was already on her radio, calling for backup and an ambulance. Her voice was calm and professional, like she had not just shot a 5-year-old child. Like this was just another day at work. "Shots fired, child down, need medical immediately." She looked at me with cold eyes as Emma's blood stained my shirt. Father was endangering the child. I had no choice. The ambulance ride felt like it lasted hours, but it was probably only 8 minutes to Millbrook General Hospital. I held Emma's hand while the paramedics worked on her leg, trying to stop the bleeding and keep her stable. Her face was so pale, her eyes wide with shock and pain. "Daddy, why did the police lady hurt me?" she whispered. I had no answer for that question. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us become the monsters instead? At the hospital, they immediately took Emma into surgery. I tried to follow, but the nurses stopped me at the door. I stood in that bright white hallway, Emma's blood still on my hands and shirt, watching them wheel my baby girl away from me. That was when Sheriff Karen walked through the hospital doors. She had changed into a clean uniform. Her hair was perfectly in place, and she carried a clipboard with official-looking papers. When she saw me, she approached with the same cold confidence she had shown in the street. Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you some questions. Questions? You shot my daughter. The words came out louder than I intended. Several nurses looked in our direction. I responded to a domestic disturbance call. When I arrived, you were in the street with the child, shouting and behaving erratically. Karen's voice was steady, professional. You refused to comply with my lawful orders and made threatening movements. That is not what happened. I stared at her in disbelief. You know that is not what happened. I have already filed my report. The child was in immediate danger due to your reckless behavior. I used necessary force to protect her from further harm. The lies came so easily from her mouth. She stood there in her uniform, representing law and order, and lied like it was breathing. I realized then that she had already decided how this story would be told, and the truth had nothing to do with it. Dr. Martinez came out of surgery 3 hours later. Emma was stable, but the bullet had shattered bone in her left leg. She would need multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. There was a chance she would always have a limp. "Can I see her?" I asked. "Family only," Dr. Martinez said, glancing nervously at Sheriff Karen. "I am her father." According to this report, Karen held up her clipboard, you are being investigated for child endangerment and reckless behavior. Until Child Protective Services clears you, supervised visits only. My world collapsed again. First, they shot my daughter. Now they were taking her away from me too. The nurses started treating me differently after Karen spoke with them. Instead of sympathy, I got suspicious looks. Whispered conversations stopped when I walked by. Someone had convinced them that I was the bad guy in this situation. Karen's report painted me as an unstable single father who had endangered his child by allowing her to run into traffic. She claimed I had been shouting and acting aggressively when she arrived. According to her version, she had fired her weapon only when I made threatening movements toward her while she was trying to protect Emma. None of it was true, but it was written on official police letterhead and signed by the sheriff. In small towns like Millbrook, that kind of authority carries enormous weight. People believe what they read in police reports. I sat in that hospital waiting room for 6 hours before they let me see Emma for 15 minutes. She was so small in that big hospital bed, her leg wrapped in bandages and elevated in a metal frame. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed. "Daddy, when can we go home?" she asked. I did not know how to tell her that I was not sure we would ever really go home again. Emma spent 4 days in the hospital. During those 4 days, I barely slept and barely ate. I just sat in that uncomfortable chair beside her bed, holding her hand and trying to figure out how to fight back against what felt like an impossible situation. On the third day, my neighbor Mrs. Henderson came to visit. She brought flowers for Emma and a worried expression for me. "I cannot stop thinking about what I saw," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "What you saw?" From my kitchen window, I saw the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson was 73 years old and had lived on our street for 40 years. She was not the type to make things up or cause trouble. "Will you tell me what you saw?" She described the same scene I remembered. Emma chasing the ball, me running after her, scooping her up safely. No shouting, no aggression, no threatening behavior, just a father protecting his child. "There is something else," Mrs. Henderson said. "I have a security camera on my front porch. It might have caught the whole thing." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since the shooting. Video evidence could prove Karen was lying. It could show the world what really happened in our quiet street. We went to Mrs. Henderson's house that evening after visiting hours ended. Her security system was simple but effective, recording everything that happened in front of her house. We scrolled through the footage from Tuesday morning until we found the right time stamp. There it was, everything exactly as I remembered it. Emma playing in the yard, chasing the ball into the street, me running after her and picking her up safely. No domestic disturbance, no shouting, no threatening behavior toward anyone. The footage showed Karen pulling up in her patrol car and immediately approaching with her weapon drawn. It showed her escalating the situation from calm to dangerous within seconds. Most importantly, it showed her firing at a man who was clearly trying to protect his child, not harm her. "This changes everything," I whispered. But when I contacted the police department the next day, I learned it would not be that simple. The desk sergeant told me that any evidence related to an ongoing investigation had to go through proper channels. I needed to submit a formal request, which would be reviewed by the investigating officer. The investigating officer was Sheriff Karen. I tried calling the state police, but they referred me back to local jurisdiction. I contacted a lawyer, but the only attorney in Millbrook was Karen's brother-in-law. The closest independent legal help was 60 miles away in the county seat, and they wanted a retainer I could not afford. It felt like every door was slamming shut. Karen had not just shot my daughter, she had created a system where the truth could not reach the surface. That was when Detective Martinez found me. He was a 20-year veteran of the state police who had been quietly investigating complaints about excessive force in Millbrook. Karen did not know about his investigation yet, and he wanted to keep it that way. "I have been hearing rumors about Sheriff Karen for months," he told me over coffee at a diner 2 towns away. "Your case might be the key to proving what I have suspected all along." Detective Martinez had files on 3 other incidents involving Karen: a teenage boy who claimed she had planted drugs in his car, a woman who said Karen had used excessive force during a routine traffic stop, an elderly man who insisted Karen had entered his property without a warrant and threatened him. In each case, Karen's report told a different story than the witnesses. In each case, the community had sided with their sheriff over outsiders and troublemakers. "But you have something the others did not," Martinez said. "You have video evidence." Mrs. Henderson agreed to turn over her security footage to Detective Martinez. For the first time since the shooting, I felt like someone with real authority was listening to the truth instead of Karen's lies. Emma was finally released from the hospital with a cast that went from her ankle to her hip. She would need crutches for months and physical therapy for even longer. But she was alive, and now we had hoped that justice might be possible. Detective Martinez worked carefully and quietly. He knew that if Karen discovered his investigation too early, evidence might disappear and witnesses might change their stories. Small-town corruption thrives in secrecy, and exposing it requires patience and strategy. Over the next month, while Emma struggled with physical therapy, and I fought to clear my name with Child Protective Services, Martinez built his case piece by piece. The teenage boy with the drug charges was named Tyler Morrison. He was 17, had no criminal record, and was planning to join the military after graduation. According to Karen's report, she had pulled him over for speeding and discovered methamphetamine in his glove compartment during a routine search. But Tyler's story was different. He said Karen had pulled him over without cause, then disappeared into her patrol car for several minutes before approaching his vehicle again. When she searched his car, she went directly to the glove compartment like she already knew what she would find there. "I never touched drugs in my life," Tyler told us during a recorded interview. My mom would kill me and the military would never take me. I was set up. The woman from the traffic stop was named Maria Santos. She was a nurse at Millbrook General, single mother of 3, no criminal history. Karen had pulled her over for a broken tail light, but according to Maria, things escalated quickly when she asked why she needed to get out of her car for a simple equipment violation. She grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back, Maria explained, showing us photos of bruises that had faded months ago. I was not resisting. I just asked a question. Karen's report described Maria as belligerent and potentially intoxicated, requiring physical restraint for officer safety. But Maria had been on her way to work at the hospital, where blood tests later proved she had no alcohol or drugs in her system. The elderly man was Harold Peterson, a 78-year-old retired teacher who lived alone at the end of Maple Street. Karen claimed she had responded to reports of suspicious activity at his residence and found evidence of illegal firearm storage. Harold said Karen had shown up at his door demanding to search his house for reasons she never explained. When he asked to see a warrant, she pushed past him and spent 20 minutes going through his belongings. She did not find any illegal weapons because Harold did not own any weapons at all. She was looking for something to charge me with, Harold said, his hands shaking as he spoke. When she could not find anything real, she wrote up some nonsense about improper storage of hunting equipment. I do not even hunt. Each story followed the same pattern. Karen would target someone she saw as vulnerable or inconvenient, then create justification for her actions after the fact. Her reports always painted her as the professional officer dealing with difficult citizens, but the witnesses told a very different story. Detective Martinez also discovered financial irregularities in Karen's department. Overtime claims that did not match dispatch records, equipment purchases that seemed inflated, asset forfeiture cases where the seized property disappeared from evidence storage. She has been running Millbrook like her personal kingdom, Martinez explained. And anyone who questions her methods gets labeled as a troublemaker or worse. Meanwhile, Emma was making slow progress in physical therapy. Her left leg was weaker than her right, and she tired easily during our sessions. The cheerful little girl who used to run and jump and play soccer now moved carefully, always aware of her limitations. "Will I ever be able to run fast again, Daddy?" she asked me one evening as I helped her with her exercises. "We are going to do everything we can to help you get stronger," I promised her. But privately, I worried that Karen had stolen more than just her sense of safety. She might have stolen Emma's childhood too. The community remained divided about our case. Some people, especially older residents like Mrs. Henderson and Harold Peterson, were beginning to ask questions about Karen's version of events. But others, particularly Karen's supporters on the town council and in the business community, continued to defend her. "That family moved here from the city," I heard someone say at the grocery store. "They do not understand how we do things in Millbrook." Karen had convinced many people that I was an outsider causing trouble for their respected sheriff. She had turned my fight for justice into a threat to their small-town way of life. But Detective Martinez assured me that truth had a way of surfacing, even in places where people preferred comfortable lies. "We just need to be patient," he said, "and prepare for the fight of our lives." Detective Martinez finally had enough evidence to take the case to federal authorities. The pattern of civil rights violations, combined with the video evidence from Emma's shooting, painted a clear picture of systematic abuse of power. The FBI opened an official investigation into Sheriff Karen and the Millbrook Police Department in late September, 3 months after Emma was shot. I thought this would be the moment when everything changed, when justice finally began to move in our direction. I was wrong about how easy it would be. Karen's legal team, funded by the police union and supported by the town council, launched an immediate counterattack. They filed motions challenging the federal jurisdiction, questioning the validity of Mrs. Henderson's security footage, and demanding detailed psychiatric evaluations of everyone who had made complaints against Karen. They also went after me personally. Suddenly, my divorce records were being examined in court documents. My financial history was being questioned. My parenting abilities were being challenged by people who had never met Emma or me. Karen's lawyers painted me as an unstable single father who had moved to Millbrook to escape problems in my past, then targeted their client when she tried to protect his endangered daughter. The character assassination was brutal and public. Local newspapers ran stories about the investigation, but they focused more on the disruption to the community than on Karen's alleged crimes. Headlines read, "Federal investigation divides small town," and outside agitators challenge local law enforcement. Emma started having nightmares again. The stress of the legal proceedings, combined with the ongoing physical therapy and the whispered conversations that followed us everywhere in town, was taking a toll on her recovery. "I heard some kids at school talking," she told me one evening. "They said their parents think we are bad people." How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes adults choose to believe convenient lies instead of difficult truths? How do you help a child understand that the police officer who shot her still had supporters who thought she was the victim in this situation? The first major breakthrough came when Tyler Morrison's case went to trial. His lawyer, working with Detective Martinez and the federal investigators, had found security footage from a gas station that showed Tyler's car on the morning of his arrest. The timestamp proved that he had stopped for gas just minutes before Karen pulled him over, and the footage clearly showed him looking through his glove compartment for his registration and insurance papers. The glove compartment was empty when Tyler looked through it at the gas station. There were no drugs in his car before Karen pulled him over. Tyler's drug charges were dismissed, but more importantly, the judge ordered an investigation into possible evidence tampering. Karen's supporters claimed this was just one case and did not prove a pattern, but the foundation of her credibility was starting to crack. Maria Santos decided to file a civil lawsuit for excessive force. Harold Peterson came forward with additional evidence about Karen's illegal search of his property. 2 more residents contacted Detective Martinez with their own stories about Karen's abuse of authority. The wall of silence that had protected Karen for years was finally beginning to crumble. But Karen was not going down without a fight. Anonymous phone calls started coming to our house at all hours of the night. Someone spray-painted "liar" on our garage door. Emma's bicycle was stolen from our backyard, and when I reported it to the police, the desk sergeant suggested maybe I should be more careful about securing my property. "They are trying to intimidate you into dropping the case," Detective Martinez warned me. "This is when it gets dangerous." He was right. 3 days later, as Emma and I were leaving her physical therapy appointment, a car followed us home and sat outside our house for over an hour. When I called the state police, they sent a patrol car, but the suspicious vehicle was gone by the time they arrived. I started keeping all the curtains closed and double-checking the locks on our doors every night. Emma noticed the change in our routine, and it frightened her. "Are the bad people going to hurt us, Daddy?" "No, sweetheart, we are going to be fine." But I was not sure I believed it myself. The stakes were rising every day. Karen had too much to lose to give up easily, and I was beginning to understand that she had more supporters and more resources than I had initially realized. Detective Martinez arranged for increased security around our house and Emma's school. He also warned me that the final phase of the investigation would be the most dangerous. When cornered animals have nothing left to lose, he said, that is when they become most unpredictable. The federal grand jury convened on a cold November morning. I had been waiting for this day for 6 months, but when it finally arrived, I felt more nervous than relieved. This was our chance to present all the evidence we had gathered, but it was also Karen's last opportunity to destroy our case before it reached trial. Emma insisted on testifying. Despite everything she had been through, despite the nightmares and the physical therapy and the cruel whispers at school, my brave little girl wanted to tell her story to the grand jury. "I want to help put the bad police lady in jail," she said with the kind of simple moral clarity that only children possess. Detective Martinez had prepared her carefully for the testimony. He explained that she would be in a room with adults who wanted to hear the truth about what happened to her. He assured her that Sheriff Karen would not be there and that she would be safe. On the morning of her testimony, Emma wore her favorite blue dress and carried the stuffed rabbit that helped her feel secure. I walked with her to the courthouse, holding her hand as we climbed the steps past the reporters and cameras that had gathered outside. Inside the grand jury room, Emma told her story in her own words. She described playing in the backyard, chasing her soccer ball into the street, and her daddy running to keep her safe. She talked about the loud noise that hurt her ears and the pain in her leg and the scary ride in the ambulance. "The police lady said my daddy was bad," Emma testified, her voice small but clear. "But my daddy is good. He was trying to protect me." When she finished, there was not a dry eye in that room. Even the court reporter was wiping away tears. But Emma's testimony was just the beginning. Detective Martinez presented the security footage from Mrs. Henderson's camera, the evidence of tampered drug cases, the financial irregularities in Karen's department, and the testimonies from multiple victims of her abuse of power. The pattern was undeniable. Sheriff Karen had been running a corrupt operation for years, targeting vulnerable citizens and manufacturing evidence to support her actions. Emma's shooting was not an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was part of a systematic pattern of criminal behavior. The grand jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with their decision. Sheriff Karen would be indicted on federal charges including deprivation of rights under color of law, evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. But Karen was not going to surrender quietly. When the federal marshals arrived at the Millbrook Police Department with the arrest warrant, they found that Karen had barricaded herself in her office and was refusing to come out. She had her service weapon with her and was demanding to speak with the town mayor and her lawyer before she would consider surrendering. The standoff lasted 3 hours. During that time, Karen made desperate phone calls to everyone she thought might help her. She called the police union, the town council, the local newspaper, and several officers in neighboring departments. She was looking for someone, anyone, who would validate her version of events and help her avoid the consequences of her actions. Nobody came to her rescue. The SWAT team arrived just after noon. These were not local officers who might have personal loyalties to Karen. These were state and federal law enforcement professionals who had seen the evidence and knew exactly what kind of person they were dealing with. Emma and I watched from Detective Martinez's car as the tactical officers surrounded the police station. After months of feeling powerless against Karen's authority and influence, it was surreal to see her reduced to a cornered suspect hiding behind a locked door. "Is that the bad police lady's work?" Emma asked, pointing to the building. "Yes, sweetheart, and she cannot hurt anyone else now." The negotiator finally convinced Karen to surrender. She walked out of the police station in handcuffs, her head down, her perfect uniform wrinkled and stained. The woman who had terrorized our community with her badge and gun was now just another criminal being led away to face justice. As the police car carrying Karen drove past us, she looked through the window and made eye contact with me for just a moment. There was no remorse in her expression, no acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Even in defeat, she remained convinced that she was the victim in this situation. But it did not matter what Karen believed anymore. The law was finally on our side, and justice was about to be served. Sheriff Karen's trial began the following spring. By then, Emma was walking without crutches most of the time, though she still limped when she was tired. We had both been through months of therapy, physical therapy for her, counseling for both of us, and we were slowly learning how to live with what had happened to us. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, I sat in that courtroom and watched Karen's crimes be exposed for the whole world to see. Witness after witness testified about her abuse of power, her manufactured evidence, and her systematic targeting of vulnerable citizens. Tyler Morrison, now in his 2nd year of military service, testified about the drugs that had been planted in his car. Maria Santos described the excessive force she had endured during a routine traffic stop. Harold Peterson, despite his age and failing health, insisted on testifying about the illegal search of his home. Emma testified again, this time in open court with cameras recording every word. She had grown taller and more confident in the months since the grand jury, but she still carried her stuffed rabbit for courage. "The police lady shot me when I was playing with my daddy," she said, looking directly at the jury. "She said my daddy was bad, but he is not bad. He takes care of me." Karen's defense team tried to portray her as a dedicated officer who had made difficult decisions in dangerous situations. They claimed she was being persecuted by federal authorities who did not understand the challenges of small-town law enforcement. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Judge Harrison sentenced Karen to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As he read the sentence, he spoke directly to her about the trust she had violated and the lives she had damaged. "You took an oath to serve and protect the citizens of your community," Judge Harrison said. "Instead, you used your authority to intimidate, harm, and oppress the very people you were sworn to defend. Your actions have brought shame to law enforcement and trauma to innocent families." Karen showed no emotion as she was led away in shackles. She had maintained her innocence throughout the trial, and I suspected she would continue to see herself as the victim even behind prison walls. The conviction triggered a complete overhaul of the Millbrook Police Department. A new sheriff was appointed from outside the community, and new policies were implemented to prevent future abuse of authority. Federal monitors would oversee the department for the next 5 years to ensure compliance with civil rights laws. Emma and I received a settlement from the town that would help pay for her ongoing medical expenses and provide for her education. More importantly, we received something that money could not buy: vindication and justice. On the 1st anniversary of the shooting, Emma and I planted a tree in our backyard. It was a small oak sapling that would grow slowly but steadily over the years, just like Emma's recovery and our healing process. This tree will be big and strong someday, Emma said as we patted soil around its roots. Just like you, I replied. Emma still has difficult days. Sometimes the nightmares return, and sometimes her leg hurts when the weather changes. She will always carry physical and emotional scars from what Karen did to her. But she is also stronger than I ever imagined possible. She has learned that good people can fight back against bad people and win. She has seen that justice, though slow and difficult, is still possible in America. We stayed in Millbrook. This is our home now, and we were not going to let one corrupt sheriff drive us away. The community that once doubted us has come to respect our courage in standing up to corruption. Emma starts middle school next year. She wants to be a lawyer when she grows up, so she can help other people fight back against bullies who abuse their power. I could not be more proud of her.